Hey guys, it's Keith. It's the 23rd of January, 2024, and today's my birthday. Not the biggest deal at my age, but something to acknowledge nonetheless. I am appreciative today of my parents for giving birth to me. I really um, admire my brother and the way he celebrates his birthday because he's always with our mom on his birthday, which makes a lot of sense because your birth is like directly of your mother, let's say. Um, and she sent me a nice text with many emojis. And my dad sent me an email. He likes to take snippets from his memoir that he wrote when he was 50, and he sends me his thoughts that he had back then. That was in the 90s, and I'm going to actually read this and make comments. This is not meant as a criticism, Dad, but I do want to reflect on your reflections because I find this email amusing. So I'm here looking at it here. He writes, from my 50th year, January 23rd, 1996. On the subject of Keith's birthday, I have a few thoughts. It's a funny way to open an idea, I find that sentence structure interesting, I suppose, from a writing point of view. It's a passive sentence. Um, I think I would write that just like today is Keith's birthday. Period. I have a few thoughts, something like that. But I do like to compare my writing to my dad's, since we both have a passion for writing. He's apparently broken up with Leslie. That's so funny, Leslie. I mean, she does not make much of a blip on my radar when I think about loves of my life, but she was formative for sure, leaving middle school into high school. But I was a late bloomer. It wasn't like that was a significant relationship at all, but it's funny that he's reflecting on that. Although the break seems to have occurred without too much drama, on Keith's side at least. Like he really wanted to make that point as if there was a lot of trauma on her end or something. I think they just decided it was too difficult to make the relationship work when they are in different schools and live a good 30 minutes drive from each other. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of words for um I mean, a breakup for sure for a 15-year-old kid. I mean, it's a big deal. But just to contextualize that, like I had girlfriends. Like I that was the kind of kid I was, Like I remember my first crushes. Like I had there was this girl called Joanne or Joanna. No, I'm forgetting. I think it's Joanna. When I was like really little, like in second or third grade, first grade even. Like that was the first girl I remember actually like liking, and that felt very formative. Like taking naps next to her was like a very exciting thing to do. And then when I was in fifth and sixth grade, there was this girl called Kristen Tara who I went to school with, and we were on again, off again. Like we dated the way that a fifth grader can, which is not. But like, I remember feeling heartbroken by her because she dated another kid after me, and then I think we might have dated again, or we were friends. I mean, I'm saying the word dated. I mean, it's just words. Um, and then in middle school, I was kissing girls. Like I discovered French kissing, and that was a big deal. So with Leslie, that was coming out of middle school. So I guess it was the most significant to that point, obviously. But, as an adult man reflecting on it, I think of my first girlfriend as being Rachel, which was a year after this one. Be that as it may, Keith is certainly growing up. I think that's the key clause right there. I mean, that's what this paragraph is really all about. Gone are the days when he would sit in my lap and just talk to me. Gone too are the nights when I would help him with his homework. He is 15 now, physically mature, I'm sure. No, that is certainly not true. I was I don't I wouldn't consider my 15-year-old self physically mature in any way. Certainly my 14-year-old self. Um I don't know in what way I would be considered physically mature. I certainly didn't have any, bulk physically, and sexually I was not physically mature. Um, he is only half. He's only a half inch or so shorter than me now, and still growing. Yeah, that must have made me like 5'7" or 5'8". I think my dad is kind of short, or maybe average for a man. 5'9". I mean, I'm 6 foot now, so I was nowhere near my physical maturity. And emotionally, just about at the point where he will start to fall in love for real. I think that's spot on, because I did basically fall in love for real this following year. I guess when I was 15. So like, let's see, this was January 96. So that was me as a freshman in high school. So a year after this, I guess 9 months later in September, I fell in love for real, with Rachel. But even that, like when you're an adult and you think back on like your first love, depending on like how you measure that or how you mature, like Rachel and I lost our virginities together. So sexually, it was like my real first love. And the emotions were super intense. Like everything before that paled by comparison. But, now when I think about my exes and love, I think of two exes in particular, Rebecca and Sasha, as like loves of my life, let's say. And yeah, even Rachel doesn't quite enter that pantheon. So Leslie it's just funny to think about this. Like my dad is really focused on his 50th year, which is certainly momentous and an occasion to reflect and write a memoir. But to talk about a 15-year-old, it's just funny because a 15-year-old, like what they go through feels very real to them, obviously, but in hindsight, with so much to compare it to, it's kind of laughable to me, I guess. But yeah, I think he was right about this line. I can't get over how fast it all happened, but that's an old theme with me. I remember when Keith was born, a friend told me that in absolutely no time he would be leaving home to go to college. I chuckled at the time, wondering probably if he would ever get out of diapers. That day is not very far off now, which is more than a little sad. So, it's very touching to read these words from my dad, but it's also like I have this distance about it because I am just not nearly as sentimental as he is. I've processed my sadnesses over time. I don't know. To me, like loss is sad for sure, but I think it's more like the loss of a great love, or like when a relationship is fully, traversed, or if you lose a parent or somebody very close to you, that's very sad because you're never going to get it back. To mourn a child aging, well, first of all, I'm not a father, so I can't relate. But I've certainly had things close to me that have grown and that I've ended up losing, pets or you know eras in my life. I'm thinking about like I was thinking recently about this era in Berlin. Like it was a 2-year span when I was working at this co-working agency, and I was so close with this girl Clara, and those were such good days, and they could have become so much more. Like there was so much potential in that relationship with Clara and that time that we shared working together, and that's really sad for me to think about because that time just like fully passed and it's gone. By comparison, like thinking about my dad here, trying to understand him and relate to him, I'm not sure what the sadness is. Like, what's so great about a baby in diapers? Like what's so sad about somebody going to college? Like they're growing up. That's what humans do. That's what you're supposed to do. Like it would be sad if I failed to get into college and then my life went this negative way, right? Or like I don't know, like I'm just not quite understanding. Like it'd be sad if he missed out like if he was like an absent father and he missed out on those days when I would sit in his lap and he would talk and we would just talk to each other. Like he has those memories, you know, like what's sad about it? I don't get that. Like time passing is not sad, you know, like regret is sad, missing out on opportunities is sad, but just watching something you love evolve, I mean, that seems cool to me. I also remember when Keith outgrew his first pair of shoes, or was it his first red nightie? That is a really weird detail to include here. I wanted Jerry to save it just so we could remember. She pashawed me and shipped it off to the Goodwill. Ending this paragraph on a proper noun, the Goodwill, is funny to me. This whole thing is funny to me. I mean, it's just like reeks of sentimentality, you know, it's just dripping in it. Like, take a photo, you know, like cherish the photograph. I don't understand. Like, I'm so, like, I don't know, nonplussed by this idea of my first red nightie or pair of shoes. Like, who cares? Like, I don't miss that at all as a memory. Like, my parents, you know, my dad is very sentimental, my mom less so. When I visit their place, like, there are things, there are keepsakes, there's memorabilia to cherish. There are souvenirs from, like, the eras of my life. And I certainly have nostalgia. I can relate to my dad on this topic of nostalgia for sure. But the things he remembers and the things I remember are obviously different. But even if, like, it was, like, this thing of, like, I mean, to me, like, everything before 15 years old, like, it's very hard for me to fully care. Because I think that as humans, we really come online during puberty. And before that, there are things that we hold on to for sure, formative memories of our childhood. But in general, I mean, I have zero attachments to my childhood clothing, for instance. And I just wonder, Dad, if you really do have those attachments still. Like, I think that you're probably attached to your memoir, you know, that you send me snippets from like this, which makes a lot of sense because that was like you're pouring yourself into this creative process and you have this, you know, evidence of it. You have this thing that's come of it, and it's encapsulating the way that you were thinking about life at that time, and that is extremely, you know, valuable. I can appreciate cherishing that. But the thoughts specifically are just so strange to me. Like, you're looking at your son at 15 who's like entering emotional maturity and, you know, achieving these kind of life, you know, moments, and you're just reminiscing on his pairs of shoes and red nightgown. I don't even know what a nightie is. I guess it's like a big pajama thing. But, like, to be thinking about that when your kid is 15 is just so weird. I mean, I guess I just don't get it because I'm not a dad. But when I think about my dog, like when she was a puppy, I'm not, like, sentimental about it, you know? Like, I'm glad that Kobe doesn't, you know, tear up shoes anymore. Like, there's nothing to, like, mourn about that. When Kobe dies, that's something to really mourn. But, like, until then, I just cherish being with her. So I'm, like, surprised that my dad isn't just, like, appreciating the 15-year-old and instead is, like, going back in time to the baby. I see some of myself in Keith, some of Jerry too, but far less than I did in the early years. He is very much himself. His identity is unique and special. That's really nice. And I get what he's saying because I do feel like in those turbulent years, I was like getting into crazy fashion and growing my hair out and dyeing it colors and getting like into really like, you know, alternative and punk aesthetics. And there was nothing like my parents in that. Even before that, though, like, I was super into The Simpsons and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I feel like I was much more boisterous and stuff. That, I don't know, it's true that, like, kids become their own people, though I guess as babies you see your parents in them. But And even though I continue to be taken aback by his typically teenage attitudes on so many things, I am, when I can step back and observe him dispassionately, very proud of who he is and who he is becoming. It's a nice sentence. It's a nice sentiment in this sentence somewhere. It's like a little weird to me. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of commas, Dad. I don't understand. Like, okay, so he's including this clause. Well, he starts with and, comma. So he really wants to like create this contrast. He wants to like, he kind of passes over it, but it's very key to the sentence that he's taken aback by this teenage attitude on display. So that's like a main point, even though it's like kind of buried as a, in this passive way. Even though I continue to be taken aback by his typical teenage attitudes, I am. Now, this is like, I think, where it gets a little stilted. I am, comma, when I can step back and observe him dispassionately, comma. I mean, it's not feeling pride is not dispassionate. Like, I'm not sure what this word dispassionate does in this sentence. Like, I guess, like, when he's, like, active with his passions, I think he's relating more to his confusion or frustration by a teenager, because I'm sure that my teenage attitudes on things of being like anti and stuff probably were frustrating for him. So like that's what I'm taking away from this, because it just seems like you wouldn't go through all this work. Why does that keep happening? You wouldn't go through all this work in the sentence unless you wanted that to carry a lot of weight, right? It almost buries the lead, because it's like he's very proud of who he is and who he's becoming. I mean, that's great, right? I mean, and that's touching for me as his son, but it's lessened by the clauses that precede it. He'll be a good man someday. I'm sure of it. I like that. See, this is the kind of style of writing that I like. It's like a clear, solid, independent clause, and then a period, and then another one, right? This is the kind of like sparse, true language that I think is more effective. And for that, I suppose I can take some satisfaction for a job well done. The I suppose there, like, there's so much, like, I don't know, there's so much like wishy-washiness to this writing. And it just, it makes me feel a little, I don't know, a little mournful or a little pensive that he wasn't that excited. He wasn't that proud at the time, right? He was like, I don't know, there's so much like unsure footing with this. And then the final happy birthday bumper boy. I don't know what this means, and I don't like it. Bumper boy. I mean, I'm thinking of that bowling reference since I'm going bowling tonight, but I don't know what that means. It has no relevance to anything that preceded it, so it's hard to know as a reader what to make of that. I don't know what that means, Dad. Maybe you can tell me later. With love, always, Dad. So thank you, Dad, for sending this to me. It is interesting to see it, but I want you to see now, and you have now heard, how I read that. Like, I'm not sure how you thought I would read that, but that is how I'm reading it. Like, I am critiquing it as a piece of writing, since, like, that's the intention, right? Because you can tell that whenever, like, something is, like, set in, because, like, this is without indent and without italics, this is just normal. And then this is all in italicized with indentations, paragraph indentations. So this is like on display as a piece of writing to study, and that's what I've done. If he had written more extemporaneously in the moment about, like, he could have said, you're this age now. When I was this age, let me think about what I was going through, or this is how I'm thinking about, like, I don't know. I guess I shouldn't get too far into that, but it's just interesting how people relate to one another. And certainly with my dad, he relates to me by thinking of himself and offering me. And as much as I criticize this, it is me as well. Like, I've gotten this from him, and it's interesting because for me, I'm going to go full screen here. For me, it's like a little awkward to notice taking on these characteristics that I don't necessarily want to be taking on. Like, you can obviously hear in my response to this that I don't necessarily want to be as navel gazing or as egocentric, I would say, as my dad. And those aren't the worst qualities, but like, if somebody is having a birthday, I find it safer to just simply wish them the happy birthday, tell them that you love them, whatever. To like turn it back on myself and think, I remember turning your age and this is what I thought. Or, you're this age now, but when you were that age, let me tell you what I was thinking. Like, I find it a little bit of an interesting way to relate to the world, I guess. And I don't know, Dad. I guess you get upset, of course, when I and Mom and Phil, have these kind of criticisms. I think it's just because you're a very influential man, and we see you in ourselves too. And I think it's worth, there's this phrase that we tend to criticize in others what we dislike about ourselves. And I think that's a really poignant thing to notice here. It's not quite the thought I thought I would be having today, but it is the case that, for me, this is just another year. Like, I don't feel like there's anything special about this birthday for me, but, I am certainly in midstream of life, and I'm like, I am who I am. And I find it very valuable to scrutinize myself, my personality, my habits, to be a better person. And I think that I want that for you too. And I think that we all want that for each other whenever we're criticizing one another. I think it's ultimately that we're eager, if not at least interested, in bettering ourselves and the ones around us, so that criticisms aren't just this hateful, antagonistic attack. They're often this guise for love and for striving, and I think I do find, I'll end on this point. I find the most important fatherly influence to be that of being better, to being more actualizing of one's potential, to not quite be good enough, but that you can keep striving for more. I think that's an important goal. So, and I think that it's a father's role very often to do that. Not that it has to be gendered, but a mother's role is often to love unconditionally and to just always insist that you're okay and that you're loved and that it's all going to be okay. And that's really important. But I think that love and comfort usually comes from a maternal side or a feminine side. And that I think a father's role is to encourage and to set goals and to strive for more, to practice in life and be better. And so I guess in that sense, the student can become the teacher, because I think as sons, Phil and I for sure encourage that in our dad. And he often just wants the unconditional love, which I can appreciate. But we don't always get the love that we want from the people that we want it from. But that doesn't mean that the people that love us aren't loving us the best ways they can. All right. I could go on, but I think that being concise here might be valuable. So I'll leave it there, if that can count as concise. And I'll talk to you guys next time.